Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Dan Kwan, and I'm a freelance full stack software engineer. I've been doing that for about 7 years now, working mostly with early stage startups in New York City, Silicon Valley, and a few overseas. And what I do in this channel is I go through some of those experiences and describe sort of the ins and outs of the business of freelancing, like how to break in, how to promote yourself, how to vet clients, and things of that sort. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this will help you out if you want to become a freelancer yourself, not necessarily in programming, in really any field like design or writing or anything like that. And yeah, that's it. So in this video, what I'm going to discuss is identifying good clients from bad clients. So obviously there are good clients and bad clients, and you want to find the good ones. Pretty simple. But when you're starting out, it can be hard to distinguish the good from the bad. It's hard to tell which one's which because oftentimes what happens is you don't really know a bad client is a bad one until the work is underway. Until the paperwork is signed, until the project begins, and then all of a sudden all these red flags start popping up. And then you realize, oh no, I'm stuck with a bad client. Wow, what am I going to do? Example might be a client might pay you a deposit fee, a couple $100, let's say, and you're thinking, oh, this is a good sign. A client's paying a deposit, and it is a good sign usually. And then after the first 2 weeks, you submit an invoice, and he submits the invoice, and he gets it back to you on time. Then the next invoice, he's a couple days late. And then the next invoice, he's even more late. Then the third and fourth invoice, he's even more and more and more late. Next thing you know, invoices are weeks behind, if not months behind, and you're stacking invoice after another. You're sending one invoice when the previous one's not even paid yet. Next thing you know, you're 3 months into the project and you have a bad client, and you're kind of stuck with this bad client. So that's what I mean by it might not show up until well into the assignment. Another example of this might be you start the project, things are going well, especially early on, because it's to go from zero to that first step. It's very easy. Set up like a landing page maybe and put up a logo. These are all very easy things. These are easy wins, or what they call low-hanging fruit. So things are going well at first, and everyone's got a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. And then next thing you know, after maybe a week or two, the client starts requesting all these changes. Change after change after change, and you're not making progress after a while. You're just going back and backtracking and fixing, and then when you make a certain change, it's going to cause other things to break, and he wants changes elsewhere as a result of the first changes, and this goes on and on and on. And that's called scope creep, or feature creep, or just creep. And that's another situation where sort of the bad client doesn't emerge until the project has begun. And so that's bad. It's a tough situation to be in, especially if you're billing by a project fee. So you're going back and making change after change. You're not even getting paid any more money, right? And you might not have a clause in the contract saying if you have a feature request change, that's gonna be in addition to the spec. And I've been in this situation a couple times early on in my career, way back on year one. And the client was just asking for change after change, and it was a project-based fee. It wasn't even a big project. It was like under $2,000. And man, that took a long time. It took multiple months for a $2,000 project. It's not worth it. I mean, that's not even like a high school kid could do better than that in terms of a couple months of pay. So this is what I mean by you gotta watch out for bad clients beforehand. They're hard to identify beforehand is what I'm trying to say, because the patterns emerge after the project has begun, sometimes considerably after. So it's really hard to extricate yourself at that point. You're in deep now. You're in country. You're in the jungle now, and you need to whack your way out somehow. If it was really early on, like day 2, and you're like, "Ooh, this is a bad situation," you can probably eject with minimal damage. But if you're on month 2, it's kind of tough. So luckily, a lot of these kinds of clients do exhibit consistent patterns that they share amongst themselves before any engagement begins. So that's good. So you can use these as cues, as indicators of a bad client, and to avoid. One is almost immediately bringing up the fact that they have a very low budget. Like, oh, we can't really afford to pay you. It's going to be tight. They might ask you to work for free, in which case I don't even count that as a client. But usually they'll do it in the sense of like, we want to ask you to work for free with the promise of paid work down the road, or something along those lines, or like a profit share or something. Like once the project or the iPhone app or whatever becomes really successful, you want to cut you in at like a certain percentage. That's a bad client. Don't go for that. It never happens. It never happens such that the project becomes hugely successful, and then the initial developers cut in at a certain percentage, or the more typical case of, once this one goes well, we have like 10 more projects that we want to have you work on a higher pay level. I've never seen that happen, not even once, and I'm on year 8 of my career, so it's just full of crap. So that's a bad client. Sometimes they'll say something along the lines of like, even though we can't pay you, this will be good for your portfolio. Don't mind that. Those are bad client indicators. So it's not it, and it's sort of an extension of this pattern. Another way this kind of impulse manifests, or doesn't manifest, really, is if the prospect doesn't bring up money at all. The whole conversation of budget isn't even broached by either party. And if you're a new freelancer, if you're new to the game, you might be a little bit shy about bringing it up, and the bad client is essentially counting on that, and they're not even going to discuss it. And then you might be on meeting 2, and they're talking more specs and more designs and going back and forth, and then meeting 3, finally you get to an agreement, and they might be thinking like $10 an hour, $12 an hour, and you might be thinking like $30 an hour. You're pretty far apart, $40 an hour. And then could have been time could have been saved on both sides pretty early on. And so that's a bad client. So you want to understand, to avoid those situations, someone should bring up the budget early. And if the prospect isn't doing it early, well, you should bring it up early, with the understanding that it's a pretty bad sign that the prospect didn't bring it up himself or herself. If you do bring it up early, and it becomes pretty clear that the budget isn't going to work for you, maybe the prospect is thinking like $10 an hour, like a high school rate, $12 an hour, then be graceful about it and be glad that a lot of time and headache was saved, and try to offer like a graceful solution, like this isn't going to work for me, so maybe you should try like Upwork or freelancer.com, something like that. I wouldn't recommend it to your friends, because then that's an easy way to start losing friends. Another sign of bad clients early on is they're not receptive to input or feedback, specifically as it relates to your area of expertise. So this happens to me a lot in technology. It's surprising how common this is in technology, where I would offer some input in terms of how they should approach a certain technical challenge of their product that they want to build, that they haven't started yet, and I'll get pushback. I'll get resistance. The prospect might say, well, no, that's not going to work because we need to do this, that, and the other. And usually the reasons are completely not technical at all and not well-founded. One of the most common situations for me is when I'm dealing with a prospect who insists that the product that they're building has to be iOS first and web second, to which I say, well, that's going to cost you a lot more money, a lot, like times 3 or 4, because building a web application is just easier and faster than building a native iOS app. So are you sure you need to go iOS first? Like, is the product simply not going to work unless it's only on the iOS? Like, for example, Uber simply can't exist unless it's an iPhone app, because it's a physical product where you have to you need your geolocation, all that stuff. But in this particular case that I'm thinking of from last year, it was a guy from New York City. I was in New York City at the time, who wanted to build like a sports gambling database, and And because I don't know if you follow sports at all, but legalized sports gambling is kind of taking over the country. So we wanted to build like a sports gambling database that keeps track of all the best gamblers in the country. And he insisted it has to be iOS first. And I'm thinking, why? Like, this is, we're basically describing a website. Why does it have to be iOS first? And he pushed back when I said, you really could go web first on this, and I don't think it'll compromise the nature, the value of your product. It might even be better. And he pushed back. Bad client. That if that's the first sort of interaction you have when you're dealing with a client who kind of pushes back on your area of expertise. So it might be design, again, it might be writing, whatever it happens to be. Then steer clear. If you're pushing back on something else, like then you don't like the name, right? Or you don't like you don't like the logo. I'm a tech guy, so like design is not my area of expertise. Maybe that's the case. And I get some pushback there. Sure, okay, I understand that. I can appreciate those differences. That's not my area of expertise anyway. I just keep my mouth shut in those cases. Like, why would I even bring it up? Doesn't really seem appropriate, given that I'm not a designer, or I don't really care about the name anyway. But when it's a tech issue, like specifically regarding tech, which is what I've been doing for almost a decade, and I've been doing it across a lot of contracts and iOS, web, database, AWS. I've been doing a lot of technology for almost 10 years. And somebody pushes back, somebody who's not technical pushes back, it's bad client, because you're just going to be dealing with that nonstop. It's just nonstop. Everything you bring up, you're going to be challenged, and from a tech standpoint. Essentially, it would be like me disagreeing with LeBron James on his shooting form, or his practice schedule, or something like that. Like, where do I get the notion that I can even make a judgment on that? And not that I'm comparing myself to LeBron James, but the point is that I am a professional software engineer. I have been doing it a long time, and I've been doing it pretty well. It's been going pretty well. The career is going well as far as that goes. So that happens a lot in tech. Now, I can't speak as to whether or not it happens a lot in other industries, but if it does happen to you, that's a bad sign, and steer clear of people like that. You're going to be dealing with a lot of headache down the road, and it's not worth it. Another bad sign of a bad client is a term I call hotshot syndrome, and you see this a lot in tech. So again, I don't know if it happens a lot in other areas like design or writing, or maybe videography or something like that. But in tech, I get a lot of what I call hotshot syndrome, where basically people, prospects and clients, act like they're already like the Elon Musks or the Jeff Bezoses of the world, when their startup isn't accruing any users or has no revenue. It's not even launched. The startup isn't even launched. There's no MVP. So of course there's no users. There's no product yet. And so, how does that manifest? Well, they do a lot of what hotshots do. They'll keep you waiting. They're never on time, stuff like that. That's number one. That in and of itself, I can more or less live with if the check's clear. Then I'll just deal with it. It's stuff I'm kind of used to, especially from New York City anyway. But when you have a confluence of other factors, so another thing that hotshots do, is they talk about all these grand visions and plans, like how they're going to build all these great partnerships with these massive brands, like Apple and Google, and have all these great exclusive partnerships with all these major brands, and then endorsements from this, that, and the other, this celebrity and that and the other, and then eventually sell their company for $1 billion to Amazon, whatever. But they don't even have a landing page. Like, they haven't put anything together. They didn't even buy a URL. Like, you can do that right now for $10 on GoDaddy, $12. I bought a URL today for my assistant, so we can set up her resume website. That's nothing. Anyone can do that today in less than 20 minutes. And when people are sort of got their head in the clouds, and that's okay to dream. That's what we all do. We all have dreams and aspirations. But when that's backed up with absolutely zero execution, you don't have anything. You don't have a Facebook group, a Twitter, nothing. And you're already talking about massive partnerships, exclusive partnerships with major global brands and billion-dollar exits. You got hotshot syndrome. That's hotshot syndrome, and that's not something that I want to work with anymore. I dealt with a lot of that earlier in my career. Again, I don't know how much of that I would expect in other industries. Like, I don't know if you're going to see a lot of that in like the writing industry, for example, copywriting. But I would imagine you do see a lot of it in like videography. Maybe somebody's putting together like a video reel for his I don't know, his a production studio he's trying to start, and it's just him and like his partner, and that's it. And they're talking about selling all these movies and whatnot to Netflix, and like they don't have anything. They don't even have a website, and stuff like that. That's hotshot syndrome. Again, it's okay to have those aspirations and those ambitions if it's backed up by at least some execution on your end, on the prospect's end, I should say. Excuse me. So that you can sort of see that there's consistency, there's congruency with your actions and your ideas. Ideally, the prospect just doesn't even talk about it. He's just explaining, here's what we need, here's the deadlines, here's the budgets, can you do it? And that's it. Those are better conversations anyway. If you keep any prospect who keeps all the emotion out of it, though, that's a good sign. That's what the good clients do. They keep all the emotion out of it. They don't care if you're impressed with their idea. They don't care if you think they're a hotshot. They just don't care. They have a goal, and all they want to know is, can you help them achieve that goal? Literally nothing else matters to them. And that's it. Those are the good clients. Those are exactly the kind of people you want to work with. And those are the people I enjoy working with the most, because it's just work, execution, just work. Here's what we need. Here's when we need it. Here's your money. Talk to me when you're done. Great. I will call you when I'm done, and you will be happy with the results. On to the next thing. And like, that's it. Those are the best kind. And those are good clients. The ones who dream all day, I mean, if they have a lot of money, I'll indulge your fantasies. But usually, even still, they're tough clients to deal with. So those are signs of bad clients. And the last sign of a bad client is, and this isn't really so much their fault, is if it's their first time, if it's their first rodeo. And again, this is especially true in technology, but in any sort of high-cost field like videography, for example, or like even graphic design, like a really good graphic design, a graphic design assignment. Like, let's say you're doing a whole graphic design kit for for everything, the logo, the website layout design, what's called a media kit. You got to have like 5 logos. You got to have all sorts of base sort of backup graphics and color palettes and things like that. That's a lot of money. That's not hundreds of dollars. That's thousands of dollars. Like, it's pretty expensive stuff. And if the prospect has never done this before, it's very scary for them. And it could be, it's kind of like having kids for the first time. Not that I would know, I don't have kids, but I would imagine that's a pretty daunting experience. And there's just a lot of unknowns, and pretty much every surprise is an unpleasant one. When I'm meeting with a prospect who's doing this for the first time, which I haven't done in a while, but last time I did it was about 2015. I was meeting with a prospect who had never done the whole startup thing ever before. Like, I was trying to make a sale. It wasn't just like a meeting, like an intro meeting. I was trying to close a deal. And I remember him and his partner were just absolutely astounded at like the potential costs. And I was quoting numbers like $8,000. I said $8,000 with a possibility it might go up to 10 based on like spec changes and things like that. I mean, $10,000, like that's like normal. That's like a fifth or like a fourth of what I normally experience in my contracts. In other words, like a typical contract is like $40,000. And these guys were just completely blown away by that. And so for a while, for about a month, we went back and forth, and they were like, all right, I think we can scrape together that much money. We just want to make sure it doesn't go like a penny over $8,000, right? And at that point, that's when I was like, maybe this isn't the right time for us right now. maybe I can find someone else who might fit your circumstance better than me, because the writing on that wall was just headache after headache. It was just going to be nonstop headache and putting out fires, and that's one of those situations that you just don't want to be in. And so really a good client for me these days are clients who've been down this road before and have been burned before. So they've hired another developer in the past. They hired an overseas team in the past. They hired a development shop in the past, and they got burned. They got raked over the coals, and they walked away $50,000 lighter in the wallet, and they have no product, nothing to show, nothing works. The entire code base has to be scrapped, and they also lost about 8 months. If they can recover from that, those are the best clients, because then they, on the second go around with you or with me in this case, it's just a totally different tenor of conversation. They've been down that road. They know all the things that can go wrong. They've experienced it. I've experienced it dozens of times. So like, it's all just old hat to me. And they appreciate what you bring to the table in those situations. So for me, those are great clients, and first timers rarely will have that perspective. It would be incredibly rare for a first timer to have that kind of perspective. Now, of course, in for what I do, the stakes are pretty high. It's pretty high cost, and if things explode, then you've got like investors who are breathing down your throat, and people. You got a lot of stakeholders who are going to be mad at you. So maybe it's a little bit different. For like a copywriting assignment, for example, where you're not dealing with $30,000 assignments. You're probably dealing with a couple thousand at the high end. But still, you want to deal with somebody who's been down this road, who knows what can go wrong, who knows how to identify value, because they've seen it. They've seen it go the bad way, and those are the good scenarios, good clients to have, and they just understand how to work with the freelancer now. They just get it, and for me. Lately, and by that I mean the past 2 to 3 years or so, that's essentially all my clients. My clients now are pretty much almost always seed funded startups in Silicon Valley, or like Silicon Valley startups. So it could be New York City, it could be London, or literally Silicon Valley. But they're hip to the whole engineering way of doing things, and they understand how to work with engineering teams, and I'm not their first engineer, things of that sort. So those are very good clients to have. People who've been down this road before. It's important to understand that early on, you might have to bite the bullet a few times and just to get some experience under your belt. Just deal with a few bad clients. I know I did. I've had my share of bad clients, and that's how I've kind of learned what the bad clients are. It's kind of how I figured out the tiers of the quality of clientele, and what you want to do. The way you want to look at it is, the market, the client market, basically operates in levels, just like really everything else. You have levels. You have levels of politicians. You've got your local politicians, and then your state politicians, and then your national politicians. You got levels. You've got levels of athletes. You've got recreational athletes like me. I just go to the gym and like to mess around on the basketball court. And then you've got college basketball players, and then you've got professional. You got levels of stuff. Well, you also have levels of clients, and the bad clients are on the bottom level, sort of the bottom feeders of the industry. And you might have to kind of work your way through that level, hopefully it won't be too long. Or if you're starting out the way I did, where you're just starting out on your own, you show up and you've got no background, no contacts, nothing, you just have to start, then it's going to be that way. You're going to have to sort of work your way through that lowest level, and then graduate to the next level, and then graduate to the next level, and then over time you get hopefully to the highest level, hopefully. The only pretty much surefire way I've seen around that is if you kind of segue into the industry, sort of through another route. Like let's say you worked at a major development shop for 3-4 years, or a graphic design studio, or whatever it happens to be. And then, you announce that you're going to go on your own. You're going to go freelance, and you kind of put the word out there. And then kind of whatever the level of your workplace is kind of where you're going to begin in your freelance career. So that's a good way of looking at it. You can work full time for 3, 4, 5 years for whatever development shop, marketing, digital agency, whatever the industry happens to be. And then if you decide to strike out on your own as a freelancer, put the word out there. And then as long as you're not poaching clients, that's obviously unethical. And then that's kind of the level you're going to start out at. And that's a good way of doing it. Another way is to work with a freelancer. And this is something that I've done in the past, where I'll have a junior developer working with me. And basically I'll have the junior developer because I have a lot of work that I just frankly don't want to do. Just sort of like boring work, really boring stuff, like tweaking CSS files for 3 hours, and just hand it off to my junior dev. And over time, if that junior dev is reliable and learning and developing his or her skills, I just start handing off clients to that junior dev. And I've done this. This is stuff I've done in the past, especially in New York. And that's another way you can kind of bypass that lowest level, that like bottom level, those really crappy clients, the total clowns. Like, you can bypass all that. That's another way. If you're going to do it like the hard way, like I did, which is you're starting from zero and you're just going right into freelance, then you're gonna have some time of dealing with these crappy clients. And for me, it wasn't quite a year. It was maybe around like 6 months, and then kind of turned that into a couple good clients. And then from there, that was it. Never looked back. No more shitty clients. And then that was the end of that. So that's it. Those are the main things to look out for in terms of prospects and whether or not they're going to be good or bad clients. Hopefully that helps you as you take on any meetings and any prospects if you're doing the whole freelance thing. And yeah, hopefully you can use this to find out who's worth working for and who's not. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos like this. And if you have any questions or suggestions for topics, or at least requests, leave it in the comment section below, and I'll do what I can to get back to you. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.